Rattenkrieg is a solitary war game about the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II. It is a free game. You can get it for free with any order from the Against the Odds website, and also there are copies of this game that are floating around in war games. Sometimes you buy a war game or a war game magazine that you think has nothing to do with Against the Odds, which is the producer, and you find a free copy in it. Hooray! Which is great. That's actually how I acquired my copy. I don't even remember in which game I found it. The game is a postcard game. The entire game fits on a single postcard, and you're supposed to cut the counters that are on the edge. The main area of the postcard represents the board. On the other side, you have the instructions. Now, since I didn't want to ruin my precious postcard that I had received for free, by the way, I didn't want to waste all the money that I hadn't spent, so I didn't want to cut the postcard, so I made a copy. Also, this way I can use the back of the original postcard as reference, because that's where the rules are. If you only have the original postcard, then either you memorize all the rules, then it's not that hard. But suppose you want a reference, then it will be a problem, because you have the game that is going on the other side of the postcard. Solitary game. The player plays the Germans in the Battle of Stalingrad, and the German player is trying to fight against the Soviets that are popping up from nowhere in the various areas of Stalingrad. Each area is represented by indicated by a number and a number of stars. That will be important later. Some areas have red shields, and these are the areas where you place the initial Soviet counters. There are nine Soviet counters. These are the Soviet units that you need to remove from the board to win the game. If you manage to eliminate all 9, you win the game. If you lose all of your pieces, or if at any point there are more Soviet counters on the board than there are German counters, then you lose the game. You have a motorized unit, you have tanks, and you have various types of infantry. The number printed on the counter represents the movement points. There is a number of iron stars on each counter, and that indicates the strength of the counter. Also, you have generals that only have a number on their initial side. All units, all counters have a reverse side. For combat units, the reverse side represents the depleted side, so the stats are either the same or worse. For generals, the other side represents actually promotions, so when you flip them, and explain how that happens, you have better stats, because now there is an iron cross that is printed there. There's an iron cross. I may have called the iron crosses stars earlier, but I think you figured out what I meant. Now, each turn starts with new Soviet units entering the game. And you also have 4 airstrikes. The number of airstrikes that you have left in the game is represented using that marker there. At the beginning of each turn, you roll 2 dice to see if and where a new unit belonging to the Soviet AI enters the board. The unit is supposed to enter in the area indicated by the total result of the roll of 2 dice, so a number between 2 and 12. Some areas, because of the distribution of numbers, will be more often attacked by the Soviets, will be more often the target of Soviet arrival. But you look at the number and you place a unit there from this pool only if there isn't already another Soviet or German unit in that area. After that placement, if a placement does occur, the German player moves, that would be you, the only player, moves any and all of his units up to a number, by a number of areas up to that number indicated on the counter, and when you enter an area that contains an enemy piece, you have to stop even if you still have movement points left, like that would happen for that tank. There is a unit here indicated with a plus that can be used to transport infantry units up to 2 areas, infantry units that need to be in the same area when the unit activates, and you move your units trying to reach the Soviet units. This general here I place here, 1, 2, and this general goes here, which may not be a good idea because some of these units are snipers that can target generals, and if a general faces a sniper, it is bad. Once movement is completed, you will flip the Soviet counter in all contested areas, and you will resolve the fight that you started there by going there. You look at the counter. The counter may be a combat unit such as this one. If the combat unit has an A printed on it, that's an ambush, and as a result you immediately deplete one of your units, which means you flip the unit to its green reduced side. That's it. Other units, maybe snipers, there you go. If you have a sniper in an area where there is a general, the sniper kills the general, otherwise the sniper has no effect and simply is removed from the game. Another unit such as this one. And here we have a unit that has an A for ambush, but also a star, and you can have units that have stars, but no ambush. What happens? How do you resolve the fight? Very easily. You look at the number of iron crosses that are in the area we are resolving the fight. In this case, we have a total of 3 iron crosses. And you look at the total number of stars that the Soviets have. You total the number of stars that may be on the counter they just flipped, plus the number of stars in the area where you're fighting. In this case, we have 3 iron crosses against a single star. Then the side that has most symbols will roll 2 dice, 2d6, and the other side will roll 1 die. In this case, 3 iron crosses versus a single star means that I roll 2 dice, and then I roll a die for the Soviet AI. If it was different, then the Soviets would have 2 dice, I would have a single die. If there is a tie, same number of dice, which is 2d6 per side. The German player can choose to increase the number of dice by 1 by spending an airstrike. So after you determine the number of dice, you get an extra die if you spend an airstrike to do so. Then you roll the dice for yourself, the dice for the AI, and you compare the single highest. If there is a tie, then it is the number of dice with the highest result. If there still is a tie, the Soviets usually win ties unless a general is present, in which case the general allows the German player to win ties. So you look at the single highest result, that is the side that wins. If you win the fight, the Soviet counter is removed from the game for good. If you lose the fight, then the Soviet counter stays there. Then, regardless of whether you won or lost, you still deplete one of your units, simply to represent attrition. You still deplete one of your units, and if the counter is still there, then you will have to fight it next turn. Also, if a general is involved in a fight, after the fight, you flip the general to represent promotion. The guy has been exposed to baptismal fire, now knows his tactics better, and can bring a star, an iron cross to the fight. So this is pretty much the game. You simply repeat the procedure turn after turn, adding new units, if new units can be added, because that only happens if they land in an empty area, moving, fighting, repeating until either you eliminate all of the Soviet counters or they eliminate you or you're outnumbered by them. Now, I've read several comments online and people complained that the game's a little too easy. And yes, I tried it with the standard version as described in the rules, and this is the version that I just explained, and it is not hard at all that way. So I came up with a version which is much more brutal and affects gameplay in a variety of ways, and I like my version much better. What is that version? Well, thank you for asking. If there is a fight, a turn in which a fight happens, things just work as usual. You deplete your unit, you move on to the next fight or on to the next turn. But as you start thinning out units on the board, there may be cases where you don't have any fights. Suppose that this is the end of a turn. This is the end of a turn, and I roll a 4 or a 2 or a 6, so no units can be added. And suppose that in this turn I decide for whatever reason of mine not to fight. Maybe I can't reach the location where a fight can be had. So either I choose not to fight or I can't. Either way, if there's a turn where there are no fights, then you still automatically deplete one of your units. This represents, I don't know what exactly, attrition, lack of supplies, an ambush that is not represented on the board, is abstracted in some way. Which means that maybe you cleared the board, hooray, and there are only 2 counters that you need to fight. But if you don't receive new counters, then that's bad, because you still get to reduce your units turn after turn. That means that after the initial attack, you need to gather in groups. Say maybe people are regrouping the survivors, and they are moving up outside from the contested area. They are emptying the central areas with 6, 7, 8, and 5, which are the ones that are more likely to be hit. Is this realistic? If they're looking for the last defenders, shouldn't they be spreading around? I don't know. But I know that with this tweak, things do get tough. Another change is that, however, to give some extra steps to my units, I consider the generals as full units, which means that they can be flipped. And with the you flip them, they do get experience, but it still represents a depletion. And if you flip them a second time, they're removed. This is something I may have forgotten to say earlier. If you deplete your units a second time, the unit is removed. I think that was probably pretty obvious. So you can deplete your units to pay for depletions that come from failing combat and from the depletion that comes from not having any fight. Basically, in my version, you will receive at least a depletion every turn, whether you fight or not. If you fight in multiple places, then you will receive multiple units. This puts the pressure on you. You're really trying to end the game as soon as possible. Otherwise, when you gain the advantage, you may simply be rolling for a bunch of turns and nothing really happens. In my version, if that is the case, things are bad. You start mobilizing your units to increase your chances that you are finding the last survivors. And maybe that's kind of the point. Maybe you're trying to set a trap to see where they are. Try my variant if the standard game is too easy for you. With these simple rules, 1 depletion at least every turn, and generals count as depletable units, the game is, to me, much more interesting. In general, this is not a bad game, with the exception that the standard game is a little too easy. This is a game that plays quickly, has some interesting challenges, there's a lot of luck, but it represents very, very broadly, for sure, the theme. It does it in a way that is interesting to play. There are some basic decisions to make. Of course, a lot of detail, a lot of depth is sacrificed, but hey, what are you expecting? This is a free game on a postcard with not many units, with not many rules, but for what the postcard format allows, I think that this is still a successful game. From a postcard game, I expect to have a game that has a hint of historicity that points to the theme without necessarily representing it in great detail, and it is engaging and entertaining to play, and I can pull out for when I have 10 minutes and I really feel that I need to scratch the word game itch. Then there are various options. There are several postcard games out there, but I think that Rattenkrieg is a good one. Also, I'm teaching a class at IU these days about representations of war in fiction, and we play several war games with the students. Now we're talking about World War II and the Eastern Front. I think that I will introduce this game in my class so I can show it to the students, we can play it with them. I don't know that the lessons from history that can be derived using this game are all that deep, but if nothing else, if not a lesson about Stalingrad exactly, it can be a lesson about war game design. It can be a lesson about how small a war game can be, and maybe that can be a good starting point to get the students curious about the possibility of trying to design their own game. Maybe I will ask them to design their own game as a project, as an extra credit. So there is that aspect. Also, the fact that if you have your own copy, I think it's not unethical that you make extra copies. That will make it easier when you're teaching a class. If you need multiple copies, say you want to play we want to play Conflict of Heroes with your students, then if you need to buy 10 copies because you want small groups to play independently with their own copy, then it's going to be very expensive. If you make copies of your original postcard for class use, I do not think it is unethical or illegal. If it is, just let me know and I will absolutely change my conclusion, say no, don't do it. I'll say like you can do it, it's a possibility, but I would not endorse doing it. Just to be on the safe side, I'm not endorsing making copies of this game. You choose if you want to make them or not. As a postcard game, it's a good game. Give it a try.